Hello, my name is Tom Cushman. I'm a professor of sociology at Wellesley College, and I'm here with my colleague, Susan Reverby, who's a professor in the Women and Gender Studies Department at Wellesley College, along with Professor Yeliang Xia from Peking University, who's visiting Wellesley College for the first time and has dropped by to chat with us about the contemporary situation in China, especially regarding human rights. Professor Xia, welcome.
Welcome.
Thanks for coming
Thank
to
you.
Wellesley.
That's my great pleasure to be Wesley. That's a world-class institution of higher learning.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and at Peking University, how you came to be there, and something about your work in economics, perhaps?
Mm-hmm. Actually, I entered the university in early 1980s. And after my graduation, I worked in the government for 3 years before I went to University of Toronto in Canada to study management. Because in 1980s, when it's just opening up to the outside world and have the reform, they need all kind of knowledge about management. And later on, I found economics will be the solid foundation in theory and in practice for management. So I got more interest in learning economics. So later on, after I became division chief of research section in the university, that's called the Academy of Management in Anhui Province. And I went to Fudan University in Shanghai to study in economics, and I got a master's degree and PhD from Fudan University. And after that, I choose to have my postdoc research at CCER. It's called the China Center for Economic Research, headed by Professor Justin Eve Lin, who became later as the World Bank Vice President and Chief Economist. And so I'm the first postdoc fellow with him. And after 2 years research on that program, and I became one member of the faculty in School of Economics, Peking University, and I started teaching actually from the year of 2000, both for undergraduate students and graduate students. For undergraduate students, normally I teach economics 101. That's the basic, like the principles of economics. The textbook that was chosen by me, I choose that textbook written by Mankiw at Harvard. I got permission to use his PowerPoints with the Chinese version, translation, right. Of course. And besides this course for undergraduate students, I also teach labor economics. The textbook is also written by Harvard professor George Borjas, and I translate it into Chinese. And also I teach graduate students course like institutional economics and also the economic history. And some other short courses I also teach to American students in Peking University who study Chinese language, but also they need some economics foundation and economics courses. Well, that's just a brief introduction.
And is there tenure in Chinese universities like there is in the United States?
No, we don't have the formal tenure system. But normally it's a rule as far as you got the position as a professor, it's very rare, it's unusual. The faculty member will decide. Well, actually, there's no single example to let any faculty member to leave the school or the university.
Is your work in economics considered to be in which particular area of economics? You had mentioned before when we were speaking that you had an interest in classical liberal economics and libertarian economics.
Yeah.
What does that mean in the Chinese context?
Well, when we import the Western economic theories in early 1990s or early 1980s, at that time we don't have much to be taught. We have to translate the foreign textbooks first. So at that time, there's a subject called Western Economic Thought. That course would be most important to introduce influential economists and their works, like Adam Smith, Ricardo, all those important, like Keynes and Marshall, and a lot of Milton Friedman, all those important guys. And well, I focus my research on macroeconomic analysis because that's work for the contemporary China's economic policy. And I was the vice director of the Policy Research Institute for the government, which was a very influential institution. And also I was the vice director of the Foreign Economic Theory Research Center at Peking University. That's a university level research center. I wrote a lot of articles in major Chinese newspapers and journals to publicize libertarian ideas, free market economy, and I admire Milton Friedman and von Mises and Hayek and all those, James Buchanan. So we have a kind of a debates with leftist scholars and also some people with traditional ideas of Marxism. So during the last decade, I made quite a lot of contribution for policy recommendation for the government, and I regularly join the conference analysis by some, attended also by some very important administrators like ministers of the different departments, and the premier himself. And actually I met the top leaders quite a lot, and Jiang Zemin I met personally, and other leaders. And among those high-ranking officials, there are also some people who was formerly scholars at universities, like Wang Huning. He was professor of political science in Fudan University, and Wang Yang, who was former the vice governor of Anhui province. And when I knew him, he's only a mayor. He was the mayor of Tongling, Anhui province at that time. And after the routine work, he would say, "Hey, David, we can talk in the evening for some to have some fun." Yeah. Of course, at that time he called me Ye Liang.
Right.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Right. So can you say a little bit about what other things you've been doing outside the teaching of economics? Can you explain your role in Charter 08, for example, and what it was?
Well, we got to know the Charter 77. That's was initiated in Czech Republic by Havel.
Right.
Yeah. And we feel inspired and encouraged by this idea. We think in China we need the constitutional democracy. We actually, the ancestors, forerunners, have been fighting for this for over 100 years. Still, we're still at the crossroad. We cannot find the solution, the correct path to that way. So it's a great pity for Chinese people. I feel Chinese people suffer so much in long history without sufficient protection of human rights, without the execution of rule of law. And we're lacking of a lot of core values. I think that the ideology of Marxism, communism, actually brought a lot of disasters to China. I think for 60 years or even more than 60 years. Then some of the intellectuals and my friends, we are determined to see we'll have the kind of declaration or testimony ceremonial statement to say we are fighting for constitutional democracy. Eventually, we're trying to draft this kind of document, which was originally about 20,000 Chinese characters. It's quite long, but by and by, we eliminate most contradictory paragraphs. What I mean is there's a disagreement, some disagreement among scholars, but eventually we got some 4,000 Chinese characters, which are core common values that we can keep. We have the general agreement on that. So all those content is not new ideas. It's the traditional values from maybe 16th century Europe. I mean, like the Magna Charta or something like that.
Right.
And then inspired by the American Revolution and independence and Declaration of the Independence, all those things.
But also I'm assuming in the Chinese context, because Chinese Marxism, of course, didn't look like Soviet Marxism. So my assumption is that built into whatever you said was a set of values that aren't just from the West, but also take into account the history of the Chinese people and its political movements. Is that a correct assumption?
I mean, for official constitution, they have a lot of values of communism and socialism. But for Charter 08, we try to return to common sense of human being, the core values, which was also publicized by the Communist Party when they are not ruling party. I mean, before 1949.
Right, exactly.
It was mentioned by the Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai, Liu Shaoqi themselves.
Right.
The human rights and the freedom.
Right.
Even Mao said at that time to American reporters, said, we admire 4 freedoms in U.S.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, he mentioned several times. So what they gave it up, because it's when they got the power, they have the ruling power, they think it might be harmful for them. It's not convenient for them. So they don't ask people, they don't allow people to know what they said before. And they don't even want people to know all those common ideas. They said, oh, it's Western ideas, it's Western values rather than the Chinese traditional ones. So nowadays they try to recommend the Confucian's ideas.
I see.
People know that during Cultural Revolution, the Confucians are the goal or objective of the criticism.
Right.
Yeah. So now they use that as a tool, try to, how can I say, I always call it like a opium, spiritual opium.
Can I just ask a bit about Charter 08 again? Because my own background was very much involved with the people in Eastern Europe who were writing these documents to resist the Soviet communism. And Charter 08 was directly derived from Charter 77. And,
yes.
And the criticism of many people in China, not just the regime, but also people who are cultural conservatives or who think that human rights are liberal democratic ideas, is that document, the Charter 08 document, is not an adequate blueprint for Chinese society given its different value systems. Do you think that the Charter 08 let me ask 2 questions. The first one is is Charter 08 something that appeals to the average Chinese person ideologically and spiritually? And is it an adequate blueprint for Chinese society? It is derived very much from Western thinking. And the criticism has been that it is Western and therefore foreign to China.
Well, I think Charter 08 cannot serve as the complete blueprint for the future, but it's a basic blueprint. I think that with the bottom line, with the core values that might be possible for all Chinese, I mean the average citizen, to recognize and accept. That's why eventually we concentrated on only 4,000 characters. because it's hard to have the general agreement on that in detail the
Of course.
clauses.
Sure, we understand that. So what's happened since, I assume that Charter 08 came out in 08, in 2008. What's happened since then around it?
Yeah, I was talked by the university authorities twice, not because they want to talk with me, because they got the instruction from the top leaders. I heard the news that I think that's quite true, because I heard news say the Hu Jintao, the former president, when he read this charter, he said all signees were traitors of China. They should be arrested. And later on, some people suggest those 302 persons are very influential. If you arrest all those people, it might be kind of the earthquake in the world. So better to kill one than kill 100. So then they arrested Liu Xiaobo, my friend, and he was sentenced to 11 years prison, still in prison now.
Right.
And later on, in 2010, he got the Nobel Prize in Peace. From that time on, I mean, when he got the Nobel Prize, I was supposed to meet his wife outside of his house, apartment building. And when I arrived there, I found I couldn't enter the gate. There's so many policemen there and so many foreign reporters there, because they heard the news that the Nobel Prize would be given to Liu Xiaobo. And then I waited. I tried to make the phone calls for several times, and Liu Xia, I mean Liu Xiaobo's wife, got controlled by the policemen, and so we can't get in touch. And 1 or 2 hours later, I'm trying to move. Then I got the phone call. That's by university authority. They told me they're just behind me in the car, and they told me that you'd better come with us. Otherwise, the policeman will take you away.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a very situation. I mean, there's so many foreign reporters. They have the interview with me. I speak English with them. They're so happy to talk with me. And then they said, just now we saw you have the interview with the foreign media. We want to interrupt you, but maybe it's international event, so we avoided that.
Right.
Yeah. So later on, they said, come with me. Okay. So I went to that car and come back by university authority.
So in that way, the university was protecting you from the police, the government police at that point?
But a few days later, they have a house arrest for me. Actually, first they put me into a guest house nearby Peking University. Originally, they want to bring me to a suburb a hotel in the suburb area. It's I think 2 hours drive from Beijing. But Peking University authority asked them to maintain me in the hotel of the Peking University. So they agreed. I was there for 3 days, accompanied by 4 police officers. They asked me to hand in my cell phone.
Wow.
I refused, and he said, you should have your cell phone here between us, not in your pocket. And then I was released. I went home.
Did they interrogate you while you were there for the 3 days?
Yes.
And what did they ask? What did they want to know?
They said, why did you sign the charter? What kind of relationship you have with Liu Xiaobo? What instruction you get from your foreign maybe organizers or some sponsors? They asked a lot of questions about my family relations, and even my son's university. I asked many things. I said, you can check with my record. They said, I should ask you. You should answer me directly. And then in some days, they have the house arrest. They have the police cars outside my house. And they have their telephone tapping all the time. Sometimes we want to go outside for shopping. for groceries, but they stopped me. They said, we can buy whatever you like, and you can go today. You know, the Jasmine Revolution, those days, I cannot go outside even. Sometime I want to attend a conference because I was invited by some very important conference with a lot of ministers to attend. They said, you can go. I said, I have to go. Otherwise, that'd be influential because the foreign speakers and also other people, they know I can't attend this conference because policemen stopped me. They said, oh, we should ask for permission from the top leaders. So later on, they agreed, said, okay, you can go, and we will go with you. We'll wait outside. So actually, they sent me there. You know, they drove the police car, which was very fast, only 20 minutes from my house to a very far place in Peking downtown.
Right.
Yeah.
That's one way to get there quickly.
Yeah.
Right. And so when did this happen? This was in 2000 and...
the year of 2010.
10.
Yeah.
Okay. And what's happened since then?
Well, sometime in some sensitive days, like June 4th,
Right.
they will have a special...
Which is the year that the date of the crackdown in Tiananmen, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
They will ask me, say, what's your plan for tomorrow?
Okay.
I said, I have no plan. They suggest you better not go outside. I will have to watch you. Don't make any trouble. And say, don't accept any interview from the foreign media.
There's something more than just the signing of Charter 08 and your affiliation with the Nobel Peace Prize winner, and I think it's significant for all of us in the world now to know that a Nobel Peace Prize winner is in prison for ideological political crimes. That gets left off the table sometimes in political discussions. There were other things that you did as well, though. You mobilized your own human rights activity to talk about constitutional democracy, the rule of law, and particularly individual freedom. There was the intensification of pressure against you was facilitated by you writing an open letter to one of the higher-placed members of the Politburo.
Yes, that's to... I wrote an open letter to Liu Yinshan, who is the head of the propaganda department of CCP. And now he's standing secretary. That's number 2 in the Communist Party. And he's also the head of the Central Party School. He's a very important guy, and he's in charge of ideological control in China. That means any publication, speech, and websites, anything will be controlled under his leadership. And his education is very poor. He only got like a community diploma, which is majoring in political education. And so I wrote a letter to him. I said, in what way you think you can manage or control the ideological of the whole China that situation? You don't have the qualification. You don't have the good education even. How can you so confident? And I wrote a lot of things to criticize him strongly. And after that, my university leader also talked with me. They said, it's very rude to criticize a high-ranking official like this way. I said, that he's a rude person to interfere the ideological freedom, the freedom thinking, freedom publication, freedom speech. That his rudeness, not mine. And argue with my university leaders. They said it rarely happened before by a university professor to criticize a high-ranking official publicly. I said, I know it's rare, so that's my pride.
Now, most university professors in the United States would hesitate before, even with academic tenure, might hesitate to criticize a very high-ranking official just by virtue of possible repercussions. Can I just ask you very pointedly, what was it that inspired you to do such a thing, knowing that you would probably be retaliated against and possibly lose your job or be arrested or interrogated or spied on? I was just trying to get a sense of what motivated you to do that.
Okay, it's simply just I can't bear anymore. I think from my generation, my father's generation, and even so we suffered over 60 years. From my teenager years, when Deng Xiaoping, the other leaders arrested the Gang of Four in 1976. At that time, I was 16 years old. I had the great expectation on future. I think, from now on, China would be very promising, and we can build a country like the U.S., like Western advanced countries. I have the great expectation on Deng Xiaoping. Of course, he did a lot of good things to opening up to the outside world and the reform. Our living standard has been improved substantially. Of course, I admire and I would say a good thing about his performance. But later on, that's the Tiananmen massacre. So I can't stand on those things. Nowadays the leadership, they don't have a real belief in communism or socialism. They only believe in opportunism and pragmatism. So I just compare with Chinese people and other nations in the world. I thought Chinese people are not less capable. They are not inferior. I think given a chance or opportunity, the Chinese people will make great fortune to the world. I think that the potential is great. From my own family, I think that my son is clever. And if he were trained in China, I think that we'll have a kind of brainwashing education. Yeah. So that's why I spend a lot of money to send my son to study in the U.S. for undergraduate studies. I think it's worthwhile. Nowadays, more and more people of the middle class, the rich people, they send their children to study in the U.S. Not because we don't have a beautiful campus. We have lots of new buildings and very good equipment facilities. But we think the content of education, that's important. The liberal arts and the freedom of speech, freedom of thinking, all those the good values should be learned, not only by textbooks, but by the whole society and the atmosphere.
So that leads us to a question. Wellesley College, where Tom and I teach, has signed a memorandum of understanding with your university that will supposedly lead to exchanges between us. What's your hope about what would come from a liberal arts women's college in the U.S. being paired with Peking University? What would you want from that?
Well, I think that any university, especially those with a high fame for international influence, I think that they should persist on the basic principles, the core values, rather than cooperate with demons without any bottom line. I think that I don't go against cooperation and exchange programs at all. I think they should know by cooperation with U.S. institutions, that means they have to respect the common value of the human being. They cannot just recommend their dictatorship, their so-called value, socialist value, to the other world or to the whole world. They are trying to establish all kind of the Confucian schools all over the world to propaganda the communist values. I think that it would be very dangerous. So never think about compromising will do you good. Will do you good forever. Just imagine if you have a cooperation with Hitler, Nazi, in 1930s, you might get short-term benefits, but it will be whole disaster to the world. I think that it might be dangerous. I often say that the Cold War is not over yet. If you have compromised with the Communist Party in China, who can be sure that in the future you will not be suffering from those threats or not?
Do you believe that Western liberal arts institutions or universities and colleges that cooperate in these ways risk losing something of their principles and their dignity as institutions? I mean, obviously, it's a balancing act. We have to have some kind of exchanges.
Of course.
And we gain some things from those exchanges. And certainly, in our case, for instance, our students go there, and Chinese students will come here, and it's great for them to meet each other and become colleagues. So there are very positive dimensions to that. But what is it in your mind that you think might be endangered or might be a negative consequence of that?
Well, I noticed that even in Harvard and Stanford, there are some scholars. They know what happened in China, but they think, this is their own business. We can cooperate with them anyway. So they emphasize more on their own values or benefits rather than the common goods in the future. So I would say by exchanging students and cooperation, it might be mutual beneficial programs, but you can never lose your own values and the bottom line during this cooperation. I think less students of the Western countries to know real China, not only from the superficial phenomenon like economic growth, fast urbanization. I think they should know more, especially structural problems and institutional problems. Why the pollution is so serious in China? It's not only a technical problem,
right.
It's an institutional problem.
Sure.
And why corruption is so, I could say, rampant. It's because the basic ethics in China is getting degrading so fast. I mean, the people, they don't have the bottom line. Traditionally, we have a lot of good values to respect people and to be polite and to maintain the bottom line. But nowadays, all those values can be just overthrown and by the communist ideas. The pragmatism is a very, I would say, money-oriented. Yeah.
So speaking of that, what's happening to you this September? I understand there's some kind of vote coming up in the university. Can you explain a little bit about what your own situation is now?
Well, I think in early June, one leader told me that by September they will have a voting by a committee of professors, my colleagues, to decide whether I should be staying at the school or not. I estimated that they try to avoid responsibility. They try to make this event as an academic one rather than a political event. They know it might be a bad thing, or at least a negative to for international community to know. Yeah. So I know those colleagues, they are not my enemies. Sometimes we feel we're quite friendly to each other. But in the special situation, it's quite rare for them to vote for me because when they support me, it means at most I can say I'm very grateful to you for your kind help. But they don't have the benefits. But when they cooperate, agree on the authorities' ideas, they might get actual benefits. So nowadays in China, they have the very natural choice like this. So I have the very optimistic estimation on them.
My own view as a professor in a Western university, college setting, obviously, is it would be, if it was put up to, let me put it this way, a situation in which my own colleagues were going to vote against me or vote me out of my college. It would be a situation that it would be hard to believe. But more concern to me as a professor is what it would mean if my institution was in a partnership with an institution in which a faculty voted a fellow colleague off of the faculty to expel a faculty member based not on academic credentials whatsoever, but on political views. It seems to me that such a relationship would be fundamentally tainted on a matter of principle.
Yeah, I think the people, the people know about the history of the Cultural Revolution and other political movements in the history. They might understand in China when something dangerous coming over, the final thing you can do is to safeguard your own benefits. You don't try to fight with the vicious deeds or action. You try to safeguard yourself. So people became more ignorant and more indifferent.
And do you think that this kind of exchange or our talking to you was a useful thing to have happen in terms of your own situation, and for Wellesley and for people around the world to know what this relationship is about, between us, between our college and yours?
I think that it's helpful, but it's rare. There's a rare opportunity to change the situation. I think that there might be a good thing to have international pressure on the university authority. Actually, I don't think that it's their own ideas. They probably have the instruction from the top leaders. I think the international community, the voice will be more influential rather than the Chinese own voices. And also, I think it's a good thing for Wesley and other institutions to do by itself, because it's a bottom line. It's a core values that you have to persist on. I think I mentioned Harvard and Stanford. I don't mean that university for the whole body will do the same thing, but actually I noticed some people they compromise with this dictatorship. So I feel it's a great pity if you cannot insist on your own values and bottom line.
And if you get released from the university position, what would happen to you?
Well, I might lose my job eventually, and I'll try to fight with them and try to defend myself with my basic rights and benefits. If I could not succeed in that, I still would try to fight with my the ordinary citizens' rights. I could bear a slogan like, say, I need a job, I need food, I need a place to live.
Right.
In that way, I might annoy them because they probably arrest me because they don't allow me to see the president or to see the authority without their permission.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I know there are some old guys who were graduated from university in 1950s. In 1957, there's a movement. It's called the anti-rightist movement. Some young students, undergraduate students, were considered as rightists. They were sent to some very poor place to have a labor camp, without graduation. And after the reform, I think that most people have been, they give their names back, say, you are wronged at that time. So they get some financial compensation.
Right.
But there are still some people, they don't have any financial compensation. Those people nowadays is over 75 or 77 years old.
Right.
So sometimes they went to the building of the president's office. They said, I need compensation, I need food. And then one of them was beaten by guards.
Right.
And then slid in bed. He was sent to the hospital, lived in hospital for 1 month or 2 months. And still there's no compensation for him.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's very sad.
It is very sad.
Yeah.
Is it possible to study in a formal way human rights in China, to talk about individual freedom, the rule of law, constitutional democracy within the context of a classroom? So, for instance, is there academic freedom at Peking University to talk about the kinds of issues that we do, the way in which we do regularly here, without any fear of repercussions, very openly and honestly? Is it the case that you can do that, or can you do it in just within the classroom, but not in a more general collective sense outside of the classroom?
Normally, it's if the conference or discussion organized by authority itself is allowable. But if the professor individually you organize a discussion or conference, that would be very sensitive and make troubles. For instance, once, just about 3 years ago, I organized a conference. It's called Democracy and Development in China. I invited some American professor to give a speech, and then the authority says it's not good with this title, democracy. I feel it's just ridiculous because Peking University is always boasting about democracy and science. But even they told me, with this title, democracy, I can't have the conference held. So eventually I just canceled this conference.
The Peking University website claims that it cherishes academic freedom.
Yeah, they always say that way. Even the government says they love rule of law, but they never have that. The rule of law actually is a sensitive term in newspapers and websites. When they say it's okay, if somebody else says it will be, it could be a kind of a crime.
So if a group of American students was studying anywhere in China, not just Peking University, and was talking about, say, the one-child policy or freedom of speech or Liu Jiaobao or one of these kinds of matters, they would probably be able to do that within a smaller setting at the university. But if they went out in public and had, say, a demonstration against the one-child policy or for Liu Jiaobao, or would they run a risk of being harassed or detained by the authorities if they were American students? Chinese students, I can imagine.
Understand. They might have the warning first.
Right.
Say if you insist on that, then you might be just driven out.
Right.
China.
I see. Right.
Yeah.
Asked to leave.
Normally, they would just have the warning, say a serious warning.
I think for me the last question is just to think some more about what you would like. Like, would you be willing to come back and speak at Wellesley? Would you like to talk about what your situation is after September with us? Given that we have this formal relationship now, it seems to me we have a responsibility to continue these discussions.
I'm willing to come to give a speech in October or any other time. Given the opportunity, I mean, I can come freely at that time. Because at the time, if I won't lose my job, I will teach. But I think a couple of days or 1 week will be okay for me.
You wouldn't envision them stopping you from leaving. They probably would like that, actually, at some level.
But I think that for academic exchange, it will be okay.
But your view, as you told me before in private conversation, is that you would like to stay in China and continue your struggle for rights and freedom, especially for professors, to be able to speak freely.
Because nowadays, people in China, they have a great expectation on me. Because in Peking University, only 2 professors can criticize the party and the government in public. They think because the Peking University in history is a place for thinking, a regional place for thinking and free ideas, like communism come from Peking University,
right.
like those libertarian ideas now may come from Peking University. So if there's nobody speak anything different with official voices, that'd be a sad strategy for whole China. So a lot of people, they send me emails, they make the phone call to me anonymously.
Right.
I don't know them. They said that, oh, we admire and respect you. You're a symbol of freedom, libertarian intellectuals. So you can't leave Peking University. You better have a better strategy to deal with them. If you cannot fight with them, maybe sometimes you can be obedient. Sometimes you just give in or compromise with them. It might be good for you. As far as you stay in Peking University, that's kind of a victory for us. They think so.
Right.
Yeah. So that's why for last few years, sometimes I feel very uncomfortable. I was followed by policemen. I was stopped by policemen. The telephone tapping, and a hacker attack on the computers. I feel very angry about this. Then I thought, I have so much expectation from my fellow citizens, so I have to persist on that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we in the spirit of the Wellesley College Peking University Exchange, which calls for exchanging of faculty and faculty views, we would be delighted if you would come back in October and talk to us in a more formal way, and also to the students about your particular biography and struggle for human rights in China, and maybe about your new book, on which I understand is an economic history of China.
Yes, contemporary China.
Contemporary China.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming.
Thank
Susan.
you very much.
for
I really
coming.
appreciate it. Thank you for
I'm
your
much
time.
honored.
Okay. We'll
Thank
see you
you.
again.
Us
Take
too.
care.